call our work session to order, and the topic is the library needs assessment, and we're going to hear from Natalie.
Great, thank you. I would like to be the third echo or fourth or fifth echo of everyone's comments and say thank you for the many, many years of your leadership and service. It amazes me. I've been in village government for 19 years now, and I learned something from every single council member. I learned something new. I see things from a different perspective. And I take your wisdom and your guidance, and I try to absorb as much of it as I can while you're here. So I just want to say thank you for your leadership.
And the same goes for us, because I think you and Jeff Batten have been here for my entire 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I've learned a lot from you both. Thank you.
All right, now on to the next topic. This agenda item is to discuss the library services needs assessment, and attached to the agenda item is a memo that I drafted, which we will go over. I'll pull it up here for the audience. The real point of bringing this agenda item for you today at this work session is twofold. One is to give you an update on the status of kind of the conversations that we've been having over the last several weeks, and talk about some timelines and some potential dates and things of that nature. So that's number one. And then secondly, the primary, I think, substance of our conversation that I'm looking for is around the types of focus groups that the council wants to organize for the public input phase of the assessment. I brought this agenda item forward now, and I realize we have an election, we have a new council coming in. You have, because you only have one meeting in November and one meeting in December, and the idea that was discussed amongst myself, Audrey, and Beth, as well as Jeff, would require us to go ahead and put something out there prior to the next council meeting that will be in December. So I wanted to go ahead and get your thoughts on that, which is the focus group stuff. So I'm going to start with just an overview, an update of the status, and that information is listed in the table there in your memo. The first phase of the project is reviewing the existing conditions, data, and information gathering, and that has already started. And in fact, at the end of last month, Audrey and Beth both accumulated all of the information that the consultant requested in terms of usage, financial reports, what types of program services, technology, assets, all of that information. So we submitted everything as requested by October 30th. And we have scheduled the on-site kickoff for January 14th of next year. That is a regular council meeting day, and we're proposing to hold that at 3 o'clock p.m. before the council's normal meeting, assuming the new council retains the current meeting schedule of the second and the fourth Tuesdays of the month. The second phase of the project is really going to kick off in February, and that's soliciting input and public engagement. And so what we've been working on there is we've set some dates with our consultant, and we've looked at our calendars and everything that's going on, and have determined that the February 18th, 19th, and 20th are going to be the best options for those for the on-site public input phase of the project. So we've tentatively set those dates aside. And then we've also identified the evening of the 18th, which would be the first day, to do a public input meeting where we would invite all residents to come and share their thoughts on library services, what services they may be interested in. We have not gone into the detail of what the format of that meeting would look like quite yet. So I think as we kind of start moving along over the course of the next month or so, we'll probably be having those conversations. I personally think that the input meetings that we have for the comp plan were effective and helpful. And so In terms of what types of questions we may be posing or what specific input we might be asking for, and whether that's at a broad level or are we asking for more specific information, we just, like I said, haven't gotten to that detail yet. So that will be forthcoming, okay? In addition to that, Debbie Joy with Library IQ has been working on the online survey. The survey that would be available to all Pinehurst residents on our website, Engage Pinehurst. The one that has two kind of tracks. So if you've used the library within the last 12 months, you would answer these questions. If you haven't used the library in the last 12 months, you would go down that line of questioning. That survey, actually she emailed it late yesterday, so we haven't had a chance to go through the whole thing, but we actually do have that draft in our possession. And I have not passed it yet to Beth and Audrey. I keep mentioning Beth and Audrey because it is Beth, Audrey, and myself who are really kind of the group that's just managing the process in terms of coordinating and scheduling everything with the consultant, okay? The needs assessment, form phase 3, that conduct the needs assessment and form the recommendation. In that phase, I don't have it listed here because it's not set in stone yet, but that will be when the ETC random survey goes out to 400, I think it was 400 Pinehurst residents. And that will be in April, at some point in April, okay? Are there any questions about the timing of things and what the schedule looks like before we start talking about focus groups?
Quickly, will you get that turned on? 400 surveys, that doesn't sound like the number we normally send out for the annual survey to get the 95% confidence factor.
Yeah, as soon as I said 400, I doubted myself whether that was the right number.
More
So
like,
let me just check it real quick.
It was more like
It is 400. It's 400 is what's needed to be
Wait, 400, and you mean you want 400 responses?
responses,
They did, yeah.
Completions.
completions.
To put that into context, until last year, not this year, but no, yeah, until this year,
Years ago.
until this year's service, we were our survey. I'm talking our community resident survey. We were getting on the order of about 400 to 450 responses, and what we did was we upped it to 700 this year, so that 95% confidence interval would be tighter.
Yeah,
It would be plus or minus a smaller
Plus or minus a smaller
fraction.
number.
Yeah.
Okay, but we're going to have to send out more, obviously, to get 400 back.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
It says complete a minimum of 400 surveys, so however many they need to
Okay,
send
I
out.
just-
Completion rate, yes, thank you for clarifying.
So are you thinking about doing the surveys design in parallel? I mean, great that Debbie's gotten her piece, but ETC their piece, and looking at how they complement or reflect or,
I think there will be some similar questions, but the intent of the ETC survey, my recollection was that it would be to, once they have gotten to the point to where they've formed some potential recommendations, to kind of test the recommendations with the public. So if there's this option versus this option versus this option, which would you as a resident support?
okay, but there might be some overlap.
But there will be,
Yeah, okay.
I'm confident there will be some
Okay.
overlapping questions.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes.
And when are you going to see that survey? I mean, obviously, they can frame it for the, what if A, B, or C, but where do you think that'll happen?
My thought is we will probably be drafting that in March.
Okay.
I think that once the public engagement on site is over, I think by the end of February, they're going to have, some general idea of what potential solutions might look like. So I would say it's probably going to be mid-March, mid to late March would be my guess. And then the survey to go out in April.
Okay. And then what Library IQ is preparing, that survey will be on our website.
Correct. So we will use the village's website, engagepinehurst.com, which used to be the old Open Village Hall. So Open Village Hall, which is our public engagement portal, we have converted to the same software that we used for the comprehensive long-range plan. So we'll be able to have more robust public engagement,
Okay.
options, questions, surveys, those kinds of things.
And how long do you expect that to be out there?
The hope for the survey was to post the survey February 18th and leave it up through looking through my notes here, Judy. I don't know that, I think we said 3 to 4 weeks.
I was going to say, we used to shoot
It's
for at least
normally
3
it's
weeks.
3 to
when we
4 weeks.
Open Village Hall, and this is kind of a bigger topic, so.
Yeah, I would say 3 to 4 weeks, but I don't,
TBD for specifics, okay. All right, okay, thank you.
Now, a big part of why we're doing this is when those of us who were on the library working group spent a year reviewing things, and then it came down to not designing the library ourselves, but responding to what the professionals came in and said, what is your needs assessment? So what seems to me, in my opinion, that worked well for the long-range plan is we had a public meeting, or we had a couple public meetings. And so, so my question is there value in looking at the schedule where we have a public input meeting on the 18th? And I understand that we have online surveys, but after that, for the potential of what the library may impact the village, would there be a value in having a one-day or a period of time to have a second public hearing or public meeting to present the results and then get some input from the residents as to the direction it's going? Again, I'm thinking about value and timing, but again, to me, the biggest thing that I took away from the year of study was we need the public and the residents to weigh in on it. So, would there be value, or could that be worked into the schedule, Natalie?
yeah, so in phase 4, when they actually deliver the final report, that is to the council in a public meeting. So we could have that scheduled as a separate meeting and then have the public provide input when it's delivered, if that's what you're
It seems a little
wanting.
late. I mean,
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking of something before the final
Before
product
the
comes in.
final.
I mean, when, after the public meetings and before Library IQ comes back with their thoughts on what the options are, that seems like a time to get the public out
Right.
and understand what they're saying and all that, because then after that, there's going to be a survey about that. So
Before it's formalized.
before you formalize the survey, tweak it or how you need to based upon public input. And that way, they may say, option 3 doesn't make any sense. And so why survey everybody about that? Or you may want to just go ahead and survey people to ratify that point of view. But I agree with Jack. It seems awful late. And it seems there could be points in here for public hearings, if you will.
The council can certainly, at any point in time, take public input on where we stand in the process. And we can schedule public meetings, as the council sees fit. Our contract with Library IQ does not include another public input meeting. So they're not scheduled to come right now. So,
That's not a good reason, to be honest with you, in my
no,
opinion.
I'm not saying it's not a reason. I'm saying it may be something that we have to facilitate, or they may say that we didn't
And it may be that-
schedule another,
Modify the contract.
or we just modify the contract. And have
Either
them
we
come
do
down.
it or modify
Yeah,
the contract, yeah, I agree.
Well,
Yeah.
there might be enough data in the contract to understand what an additional public meeting would cost prior to talking to them. In other words, there is some fee structures for any additional work, right, in that contract?
Yeah.
There is.
In putting
We don't want to
together,
nickel and dime this. We're going down a road that could be the single greatest expense the village,
Well,
capital
no,
expense the
but
village
what
ever
I'm
seen.
trying to say is,
We
I
wanna
agree
do
with you
this
guys.
right.
I agree. I agree. I'm just trying to say that we don't have to go into this blind. They gave us some data.
Yeah.
Right.
So can I help understand, maybe, Joan, what your suggestion was? Make sure I'm kind of clear on it. If I'm going down kind of the key dates on the right column, so we'd have the kickoff where they come and go through the process, explain, the process that they're going to follow. We kind of had a virtual kickoff between Audrey, myself, Beth, and Debbie already, but this is for the council to understand and lay out kind of the process and communicate to the public what to expect over the course of the next few months. Then we'd have the public input meeting and the online survey kicking it off. Then we'd have the online engagement where they'd have the focus group meetings. They'll take the input from the focus group meetings and the online survey and formulate, I'm going to call them draft recommendations. Are you looking for a presentation of the draft recommendations before the survey goes out? I think that's what I hear you
think that's
saying.
Right, you
good
need to
point.
do a checkpoint
Yeah.
with draft. right?
Okay,
It seems like a good checkpoint.
yep.
Well, I mean, you get best results with like double or triple feedback loops, meaning you go to the public, you get their input, you turn it into something, then you get their input again. And, it's best to get their input again, but you at least ought to do it.
You refine the input.
You
so that-
refine the input is what we're trying to do, not just have a public meeting to have a public meeting. So you've got to figure that out.
Okay.
That's the best results, when you get a double or triple feedback loop.
I can follow up with her on that. Did you have a comment, Jeff?
No, I was just kind of wondering myself, if maybe we could do that ourselves.
We probably could.
Might get a better result with their facilitation, but.
So additionally, there's when the new council sits and at the council retreat, is this a topic for the council retreat?
We have not gotten that far to council retreat agenda items, but this is a strategic opportunity that will be discussed when we're talking
Great,
about strategic opportunities for sure. I mean, it's not a separate agenda item, I would say, but it would fall in the pot of all of the strategic opportunities that are before the village.
The new council to consider. Good.
Yep.
I would just comment on, I'm sure we could do it ourselves, but I'd want Debbie Joy here. I think it'd be worth paying to have her here, so. I mean,
$90 an hour.
I'm sure she would be
I know we're
happy
capable of
to
doing it
come.
ourselves, but she has to be here to hear the input, in my opinion. Don't you guys think so? Yeah.
I would be happy to see if I can get her on schedule for that.
I think the schedule, with the exception of adding some type of interim draft report, however we want to express that, to the public in the, whatever that would be, May timeframe.
Would be
I think
April.
the overall schedule is reasonably appropriate. What do you think?
Since Audrey is here, would you like to come up, and do you have any comments, Audrey? It is a work session, but you are such an integral part of the library. Come on up, and if you have any comments, I'd like to hear them. I think council would too.
I kind of agree that it would be nice to hear sort of like the preliminary direction of what we're going before it's
Right.
presented. And whether or not the council wants to do it on their own or have Debbie Joy, doesn't matter to me, but I am in favor of having another crack at it before it's out there for the final look, see.
Okay. Great. All right.
Now for the tough one.
Now for the harder subject matter. The focus. Let me get my notes out so I can document this conversation. The next thing that we wanted to talk about was the focus group. So our contract with Library IQ had focus groups, had up to 6 focus groups listed. And in the contract, and they're very similar to the ones that are listed here with one change. They had a focus group with, this is a contract that council approved, community business leaders, leaders from the library, partner organizations, schools, et cetera. Focus group with Village of Pinehurst leaders, teens, if possible, library staff, and then with library patrons and the public. So they had 6 listed in the contract. And when we were going through this, I kind of stepped back and I said, okay, who are the key stakeholders? And we had telephone conversations with Debbie and about these focus groups, and said, what's the best way to identify those stakeholder groups. So we brought Audrey in, Beth and I went through them, ran them by Jeff, and then chatted with Debbie about them. And Debbie felt strongly that the business leaders and the community business leaders are critically important. It's the very first one she listed. She says that's what, libraries have to have partnerships with those schools, economic development organizations, large businesses in the community that, generate workforce from the residents of the area, so on and so forth. So she felt like the community business leaders are going to be potential partners and customers of the library services, and so she thinks that that's important. And then we got into the other groups. The other key stakeholder, other than the actual business community in general, the other key stakeholder is obviously the library staff and its customers, whoever they are. So the library, the people who work for the library, run the library in terms of the board, and the people who use the library services is another key stakeholder. Another key stakeholder / partner or potential partner that we identified, which is not in the contract, is what I've referred to as number 4, the library administrators. So really meaning those other regional, local organizations that are providing library services that maybe we would potentially consider partnering with. So Southern Pines, the state library system, the county library system, that would be a third key kind of stakeholder group. And then, of course, all Pinehurst residents. So who maybe don't use the library services. So that's why we requested the 7th group there, the resident non-library user group. So, and kind of thinking through how do you get at, so you get the library customers through patrons, how do you get at the people who don't use the library services and understanding maybe why they don't use the library services. And if there were certain things that were provided by the library, would they then use library services? Kind of build it, they will come kind of thing. And so we kind of talked internally amongst ourselves about how could we get how could we gather a group of people who don't regularly patron the library. And then that's where we kind of came up with this idea to use a similar process to the think tank, where we kind of said, hey, we're looking for a group of people who would be willing to serve, give us their thoughts and opinions, who don't typically use library services. Would you be willing to volunteer an hour and a half and come in and talk with us, about maybe why it is you don't use the library, if the library provided additional services or programs, what would those need to be to encourage you to use that service or whatever. So that's why I'm really bringing this to you now, because number one, even though these focus groups aren't until February, if you do want to try to assemble a group of non-users, I think it's going to take a little bit of work for staff, so we would need to get some applications up and have a process and all of that. So,
Well, I guess it's no secret where I stand on some of this. I have communicated this before. Without in any way impugning the integrity or the desire of these focus groups, and particularly the business community, I think it's important that we understand their opinions on this, because they are recipients of the services and would use the services, hopefully. I think they're way overrepresented, as do I think the current given library is way overrepresented in this list.
Okay.
And what I did is I went back and went through the statement of work, and let me just read what I thought of here. The first paragraph of the statement of work says it all. LS&S will utilize Library IQ to gather and analyze community input and describe the need and demand for library services in the community. And after the data gathering, it goes on to say, solicit broad community input. Library IQ will work with customer staff to formulate and execute an innovative and exclusive public engagement strategy designed to ensure broad community input to determine the community's desires and realistic needs for improved or expanded library services. Not that the business community isn't part of the community. I don't mean to say that. It's just that the focus is slightly different. Now, in my opinion, this does not talk to the given library needs or any other special interest needs. To my understanding, this specifically, these words, contemplates gathering and documenting the community need for library services. I interpret community to mean the general population of the village of Pinehurst. And I'm very worried that if we stray in any way from these objectives and give any hint of favoritism or overemphasis the needs of some, then we risk not only tainting the result, but more importantly, casting a shadow of doubt over the process and the ability of the village to govern and make decisions that reflect the desires of the community at large, rather than influential special interests. I know that's a pretty strong statement, but
I agree
I think
with
it's important that we keep that in mind.
And I think one of the things here is that Library IQ is looking at this through the library lens. I would bet 9 times out of 10, their customer for this type of engagement is the library, not the community,
The
if you will, that
community.
the village is. And that's why I think that over-rotation has occurred. I mean, and then, so, just more groups are named library, but more importantly, how big is that library community? It's Audrey, Melissa, and Lori sometimes. I mean, so it's like, really? I mean, we've just overblown this. And I think we just need to pull back and say, you know, you don't need to talk to every, member of your board, but, maybe together, all the people that need to be talked to number no more than 6 people. And they could be, that could be one focus group for that. But I think Jack's point is right, is that, we've really got to, get to much more public input. And that's why I'm concerned that one evening on the 18th is not enough.
Yeah.
And I'd rather re-swizzle this and, have a daytime public input and a nighttime public input. I mean, so that we want to get children there, we want to get parents, we want to get, just have to figure this out a little bit more. But I think we've just, we don't, I mean, you had said in your little thing, you want the business community, the library community, the non-users. And while I do think these library administrators are an interesting and compelling group, it may be too early for them.
And we can actually, I called Debbie to just get her thoughts on that. And she today said that she could get this information in a different way. Like we could do some things to reach out to them, the library IQ could, to meet with them specifically and not have to have a focus group. So she said if we wanted to have more general public meetings, that she would suggest removing that one.
I'd like to,
I think it's been a very helpful conversation. I wonder, I think there's value in what Judy suggested about maybe having a daytime and a nighttime overall community engagement opportunity. But the other thing that was just rolling around in my brain housing group was that quite often when you gather a small group of people who are representative of the community, but for example are not the non-resident group or the the non-user
Those are
group or the
non-users.
user group, that group kind of takes on a flavor and a tone based on a few people. And you might wind up with a result that really isn't all that reflective of community input because of that. And maybe it would be helpful to have more than one user focus group and more than one non-user group.
And really, why not mix them? What are the issues in that? I mean, it's like the community center open houses.
Yeah.
I may not go there.
Yeah.
And except to the ribbon cutting and the walkthroughs that we've done, that may not be my place to go, but I was equally interested to see what you're doing and what it's going to be like and give input. But, so I think that's no different really than the library or the long-range plans.
I
When,
think also, oh, sorry.
one of the things that I thought was good about the think tank is we had residents from all over the village. So and this may be,
Neighborhoods.
this may well be a stretch, but what I see here are 7 pockets of understanding and excellence. And what seems like it would make sense to me, just my view on this, is if we have 7 or 5 or 6 focus groups, as focus group A, B, C, D, E, F, in which we have a mix master of folks, because what happens is when we have somebody in there from the business community in focus group A, somebody from the village leader, the board, the residents, and you start to generate and understand so that all of those who are represented can understand different views from the different folks, whether you're a resident, you're in the business, whatever, and then see what comes out of that, because it would seem to me that
More
it might,
heterogeneous, yeah.
it might be more productive, the results, if we could mix master them, and as opposed to what appears to be pockets of thought that
Yeah, sure.
Probably all
probably
homogeneous thought, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
See, Marines can say homogeneous too, so
Can you spell it?
GENIUS.
leave that to the West Point guy.
I agree with you completely, Jack. I mean, I don't see any different outcome coming from the library board or the library staff and volunteers. They're going to say the same thing. I'd be more comfortable if all these focus groups were neighborhoods, if you want the truth, to go really far into what you're saying. We have regional business organizations input without regional money. It's going to be the public's money we're spending. I really only want the input from the public, and and obviously we have a professional group that's supposed to add reality to the public, so they don't, they have to balance this out. They have to balance it out so it's not just about, the needs assessment will have to be, the consultant will have to give that information to the public.
Right.
Because you can't just have them raw make decisions. And I think what Judy said's spot on. It's like, I think this is an unusual situation. This is not typical. And I think that's why this boilerplate approach occurred. So you had to put this out there. Thanks for putting it out there. Now we have an opportunity to really get it. And we have to make sure when we're spending public money that we're sure we're getting public input.
We also have to treat it almost like a greenfield approach. I mean, nothing is there. I mean, what library services needs does this community need? And I'm sure that much will evolve, but we have to take that approach rather than comment on what you're doing now and, and how it could be better.
I think Audrey had a comment that she wanted to make.
This was a little while ago, but actually, I think you could take any number of these groups and it would be the same people too. I mean, our business leaders are also community leaders or maybe on, so we're talking about a small community and these groups are going to overlap anyway. Mm-hmm. And so I think, honestly, what you guys want and what we want as much as anything is what does our community think? So however we round it up, and I agree going to the county and the state right now, it's a bit premature, but I think that a lot of these people could fit in several of these groups. So let's figure out a way to get everybody in who wants to talk or everybody who has something to say.
There are some ways that you can solicit people. I mean, there's a great, it's not a website, but it's a service called Next Door Neighbor. I mean, people are on Next Door Neighbor all the time asking, where do you get your rugs cleaned? Where do you do this? And I get a lot from Village Acres. And that's a community you would really want to have some input from. You could ask the HOAs from the various areas that have HOAs. Just are you a user of the library or not? But to really reach people, you're going to have to get down there, like Kevin says, into the neighborhoods and get.
And I think another thing too, when this sort of division of groups was started, I don't think there was as much clarity about the Given Memorial Library and what it is and how it operates. And So now at this point, I think, you know, we have these groups that maybe aren't exactly what we want, and that maybe, or mixing them up, you can take all these leaders, all these business leaders, library, whoever, but not have them all at one time. Take people from every group. You could do that easily. You'd say, okay, each group's going to have 6 people, take one from each group or whatever. And
No, I'm saying that I want all these people input, but the focus group, a commitment of time on a focus group with our consultant that isn't resident focused, I'd be really concerned about. I want their information, all the people here, that's fine, but I don't think a lot of it doesn't rise to a focus group.
So let's step back and maybe tell us about these focus groups. They're going to last 90 minutes.
What do
And
they
so
do?
I
What-
chatted with her about this, and I kind of related to how we handled the focus groups for the comprehensive long-range plan. There's a specific topic. So we have focus groups where we assembled, we invited specific people. We said, we've got this group that's talking about, for example, when we were talking about the business
village.
environment, right? So we sent it out to Pinehurst Business Partners, and we made sure we sent it out to the key businesses, the hospital, resort, medical clinics, those kinds of things. So to say, hey, we've got this. So when we were talking about conservation, we invited people from Fish and Wildlife to come to talk, to participate in that focus group. So we had specific topics that were directed to the participants. And so when I chatted with Debbie today, because I had the same question, tell me exactly, what this is going to look like. She said that in their experience, they have found that it works best, similar to how we did it for the comprehensive long-range plan, where you intentionally assemble a group of people. And in this case, she's proposing that they be people of similar perspectives, and that and then that she, throws out questions. She has a couple leader questions, and she finds that it works best if the group just starts to discuss in general topics, and then
Move into the library, yeah.
yeah, she said she finds it's best that she just let them talk, and then she just listens to what their perspectives and their opinions are. But they, at least historically, their approach has been to group similar, like-minded people as opposed to a mixed
And several of
approach.
the-
But I'm happy to see,
And would the focus group
About
be,
that.
it would be an interactive exchange?
Yeah,
yeah, so it's like it'd be a round table, and people would come in and talk about libraries.
And how often would the focus groups convene?
They would meet one time, and we've got she's here 3 days on site, so we've got 90 minutes. The 7th was a squeeze, so, scheduling wise, it would be much better if she could do 6. Or if you're going to mix them, maybe you only need 4 or 5.
Did she have recommendations on size?
yeah, that was my next question.
I think, I'm going to go back and look, but I want to say, I recall that being, I'm going to say 12 to 20 max.
Yeah, 20 would be
Not
big.
big, not big.
We had 12 for the think tank, I think. Seemed like we talked about
Focus
that.
groups were larger, though, weren't they?
Yeah.
If
Do
you were
you
doing
happen
it-
to remember the size of the
Sorry,
focus
Focus
groups?
groups were larger in the long-term.
12 to
street
20 sounds about right?
Well, I'm just still concerned that, a structured approach will potentially give solutions. What do you like, this solution, that solution, or we're not there yet. We haven't figured out the needs. What services does the community, what makes sense for Pinehurst?
What
What
are
services
needs?
make sense for Pinehurst?
Yeah.
Some of the services, I'll just use an example, like a research center. Libraries used to be the center of research. You did a term paper, you went there. That's not likely
while
anymore.
ago.
It's not necessary
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
So, that service, it's all those services lined up. That's what we want the community to assess, whether those services are of value and how much they're willing to support those services and quantify that. if possible, from the consultants.
I'm looking at it from more practical, how much money in the contract, 3 days of their time is going to these focus groups. And it should be resident focused. So, and I almost feel like you got to turn this, I feel it'd be more valuable to hear from each neighborhood than all these individual interest
I think
groups.
you're onto something there.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a mix, though.
Yeah, maybe a
John
mix, but I'm just saying.
Had a good point there. If you
I
mix
think-
up the groups,
I think
you
to
won't
Judy's
get
point, this is a different situation, you know, we,
a group thing.
yeah. So I'm
It
really.
seems like all council's generally supportive of the suggestion that John's made to kind of form groups that are mixed, that have representatives of these various.
Kind of like what we did with the think tank. We tried to check a variety of blocks when we,
Okay,
yeah.
If you look at the dollars spent on these focus groups, the results should be reflective of the entire community when you're done, even though it's just one
Yeah.
input path. I'm not saying it. you know,
Exactly. And you'll do a survey that also is reflective of neighborhoods as
Yeah.
well.
So the composition for the focus groups, have you thought of a selection process from when you put something out?
well,
as
that's,
to-
we're at that step, so that's what we were trying to.
Turn it upside down, just what we do to you,
Turn it
Natalie.
completely
Yeah,
upside down, but that's
yeah,
okay.
You want us to solve that problem, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we want you to solve that problem.
No,
I think
we
we're looking
don't.
for, what our recommendation in particular for the non-user group, but I think it was equally applicable for the user group, and now would be even more applicable to
Yeah.
this type of approach would be to do something like what we did when we formed the think tank, where we come up with a list of descriptors, if you will, that help us to ensure that we get a diverse set of viewpoints from across our community.
Right.
And we basically solicit for volunteers who would fill out a short application and tell us enough about themselves so that we can discriminate which descriptors they line up against, and then put together a recommended set of focus groups that achieves the mix we're looking for.
Yep.
And, you know, more non-users' money is going to be spent than users' money on the library. So, I mean, it's about spending the public's money, and we got to get back to that. We got to make sure that we have their support on whatever we're doing.
Okay. I will run that by her, and we will adjust accordingly. And then our intent was to try to get an application up next week, so that we could get applications in before the Christmas holidays, then filter through the applications kind of over the holidays. Because we want to send out those invitations late January. So,
You're going to send these out, or are they just going to be publicized that they are available? How would you send them out? I mean, I don't know.
we emailed last time for comp plan. We emailed invitations to focus group meetings.
Are we talking about
You mean-
soliciting the applications or invitations to the
Sorry,
actual
I
meetings?
might have
Right,
misunderstood.
yeah, I'm not sure I know.
He's back
exactly.
at step A, soliciting.
Soliciting. So we would do
Yeah.
it the same way we did with the think tank. So we would use our e-news, we would, I think it might be too
Every
late.
means available to the village.
Okay,
of
Yeah,
so
we
we
put it on
publicize
social
the
media
village is
website.
interested in a representative
We'd
group
ask
of
the
people.
NAC to distribute it.
Let us know if you're interested, that kind of thing. Okay, that makes sense.
Go to our website and let us know.
I tell you, we all know people, I'm sure, that are adamantly for and adamantly against a library, to tell you the truth. And there's a whole range of things in
Right.
between those two.
Good to get
And
them
I'm
to
sure
stand
we have
around.
a knowledge of people in that
Right.
respect.
Right. And I do think that this approach could work. If there are individual, key individuals that might be in those groups, she can always pick up the telephone and do personal, interviews. So,
I don't know anybody against the library. You're talking about like maybe some people are against like building a new one maybe, but I mean, I know nobody against the library. Everybody is pragmatic, for the library. But
Not
it's just,
against it
it's
as
just what
much
the
as they don't-
solution, the solution is going to be, it's going to be something that people really want to be involved in.
And when we get to step 5, that's where we're going to say, is
Yeah.
this option, is this something you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
entertain, and here's how much it might cost.
My time for a year on the library is one will always be surprised of what people say.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will look into the future about what's the future of a library 10 years from now. So there's a lot of, I don't know, I can't say a lot. I know a lot of things have been said recently about a lot of people think this. I think it's a small group, and I would say it's a small group as well, about thinking 10 is the investment worth the investment for 10 years from now, when most of what you might want to do, you might be able to do from your home. So the lesson I learned is keep your powder dry, just listen to what people say, and then make rational, good decisions on behalf of the village. And there's a disparity between the library and the archive.
As my understanding, the archives is not a part of this
That's correct.
situation right now.
They're not.
And so a cautionary note here is that's the focus has to be on the library, and we can't be, and we
Right.
can't, and to try and keep hammering that home at the.
Don't intermix them, right.
At the
Good point.
archive is not part of what we're talking about. It's the library, period.
Right.
I've only heard people against an outcome before you even talk to the public. People, I think people are really concerned that the cart got ahead of the horse on this.
Putting the cart and hiring the horse.
Yeah.
Are we doing that right now? We are. Okay, do we have more to discuss on the library?
I have my list of things to go back to her. I'm going to ask about the additional visit to present draft recommendations before the ETC survey comes out. I'm going to ask about the size of the focus groups and then this intermingling.
Reese was.
No,
If she has any major concerns with that
I think
we
the
may need
most
to be aware
important
of.
thing is like what Judy said, is trying to make sure you share with her the difference of this process than the
Mm-hmm.
process. If you could just she might give you some great input. If you could just get that point Judy said across, that I think that is, to me, the most important.
I think it is a unique assessment. I mean, it's unique in the way that if you're trying to understand what the community wants or needs, right? I think Jack said you can start with the assumption that there's a blank slate, right? That there's nothing there, but there is something there. And the people who work there, the people who volunteer there, the people who run that organization are a very important voice in this process that needs to be heard, just
Agreed.
as much as the resident down the street who says, I never will pay a penny for a library, so it's important. And I think that the way that she had this set up, it was to try to organize the groups so that, staff and volunteers are together so they feel comfortable saying what they, might want to say within that group. So when you put a library board member, a village staff member, a business community leader, all in the same room, are you going to limit the voices of people who may not feel as comfortable speaking up? So that to me is probably why she recommended it this way.
Well, why can't that occur without a focus group? Seems like a big financial commitment to get opinions from that little amount of staff. I think all this is valid information, but it's the focus group. The focus group should really get us down a road that the public, we're getting public input, and I'm worried that it could get us down a different road. It's the focus group. It's not that any of these groups' opinions and getting them together is not valid, because I think it is. It's the focus group, the spending money on a focus group on duplications and things.
I think it's the residents who they should outweigh the people with titles. And how you get to them is, I'm sure you're going to find a way, Natalie. But you may want to weigh it a little more heavily towards young families. Those are the people who use libraries, are they not, Audrey?
No,
Yes, yes.
A lot of older people,
Families with
use the library.
teens, older people, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the focus groups, if we're going to go down this route, need to be representative of the community. It
community.
shouldn't over-represent anybody.
Right.
Right.
And that greenfield, you know, platform is what we should be using. You know, just suspend belief that we don't have a library here. Now, what, if we were going to build one, what do you want in there? Books, okay? What kind of books? You know, I mean, depending upon how her discussion guide goes, that's how you kind of get it. What is it that people would want a library to do for the community? And then, to what extent does everybody agree with that in that particular
I'd almost take a cue from the motion picture industry. It's a library of dreams, not a field of dreams, and if you'll build it, they will come. So I think that might be a good thing to kind of think about.
Anybody else freezing? Yeah, okay. we're
It
all
is a little
freezing.
chilly.
Okay.
Okay.
Nancy Baldry is. Okay, do we have any other, I think we've pretty much exhausted this topic. Do we have any other work session business?
You're looking
We're
forward,
almost ready, Jason.
you're looking forward to
to
hitting that gavel, aren't you?
Well, and I am taking this was made especially for me by a friend, so I am taking this home with me. So you need to buy a new gavel.
I move to adjourn the work session.
Second.
We have a motion by John Baldry and a second by Jack Farrell. It's all the people who are leaving. We are adjourned.
Meeting adjourned, man.
Everybody, thank you very much. Thanks, Beth and Natalie,